What's up, guys? Welcome to Fold Out Fellowship, a podcast geared for high school and college students. This is where we're going to have great conversations about faithful living in today's world. We just hope that you sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of Fold Out Fellowship.
I need to bring this book to like a middle school retreat or something.
Nice. What's it called?
Chuck's Chairs.
Chuck's Chairs.
Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, and it goes back, and it's all just like an allegory. I mean, like Chuck is God basically, and the chairs are us, or the furniture is us. And then like it kind of ends with, spoiler alert, it ends with Chuck being like, "No, like I made you to be a chair, and you're the best chair ever. I made you exactly how I wanted you to be."
Yeah.
And it's like, what I love when children's books just like
good
nail and like obviously Gunnar worked at camp with me. He's he follows Jesus. Like he wrote that with the intention of like, I want this to have biblical truth in it. It's not just some fun children's book, but it's like, oh my gosh, that hits so well. I could have brought it. I'm so bummed. Could have showed it.
Well,
we could have read it to everyone. We're gonna read a children's book
It's story
today.
time,
Hello,
kids.
everyone.
Yeah.
No, well, that actually brings me to a good point. Today's episode on Fold Out Fellowship is sponsored by Chuck's Chairs.
Chuck's
Unofficially.
Chairs.
That book.
Shout out
from
Gunnar
that book.
Rogers.
Yeah, shout out
Okay?
Gunnar.
This one's for you, Gunnar.
No, but we're not sponsored by Chuck's Chairs, even though it sounds like a great book.
I wish.
But welcome to this week's episode of Fold Out Fellowship. It's your boy Waski coming in from the podcast studio. We have two awesome guests with us today. I have my coworker and trusty friend of mine, Mitchell Kearney,
That's me, Mitchell Kearney. What's up?
and Amy Delgado.
That's me.
And today, we started out the conversation kind of on the right foot. Today we're talking about comparison. And I was really excited to kind of start brainstorming, like, man, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to say? Because, man, comparison is such a huge dang topic everywhere. And this covers all facets of youth, young adult, beyond adult.
Humans, just
humans in
humans.
general. It's such a huge topic. And, here at MDPC and just here in Houston, Texas, and the United States, I mean, just everywhere, comparison's a problem. And so, so we're going to be talking about today, the ins and outs of comparison. We're going to solve all the problems of comparison.
By the end of this podcast,
By the end of it,
you won't compare yourself to anyone anymore,
Nope.
ever. You're going
are
to solve all your
Never.
problems.
Yeah.
So, just kidding. But we hope
I
to
wish.
cover some good topics. But yeah, just to start us off, I mean, where have you guys seen comparison in your lives? Where do y'all find it coming up a lot?
Gosh, I think it's so hard. I can think back to when, I know you guys are the youth directors. So, obviously when I was in that stage, it's so hard not to compare. You can't help it. I think something just happens to you where you look around and you go, wait, I'm different in this way. Or how do I compare to whoever's prettier, skinnier, has a better car? All the different things, right? That doesn't always go away. We live in an area of town that there's just a lot of things that make you want to compare against each other. And I think I saw something the other day and I thought it was so good. It said comparison is actually an act of violence against yourself.
Ooh.
Whoa. Okay, well then should it be the 11th commandment? Thou shalt not kill or steal or whatever, or violence against yourself, right? Because the only one who suffers is you. And again, not to go straight biblical, but I just think we're not living into who God made us to be uniquely. God's got this grand plan, and we each play a specific. We're all different players on God's field, and if you're not doing that, if you're not doing your role, then in a way you're kind of going against God on what He needs to get accomplished down here. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think it almost did like do not covet, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can covet, you can compare, and want. That's where I feel like comparison really comes from. Like the root of it, it's not just like, okay, like who's better? Sometimes it looks like that, but sometimes it's like, well, that person has that and I want it. Whether it's like an actual thing, like they have, like, don't covet your neighbor's possessions. Like if they have the coolest new iPhone and you're like, oh, well, I want the coolest new iPhone. Like I'm not good enough anymore.
Right.
And then that's like the act of violence kind of thing. You're just tearing yourself down.
Totally.
Or it's like, oh, well, you're coveting their looks or their brains, or, you know, how skilled they are at a certain sport or whatever it is. It's like, that's all just an act of violence against yourself. Cause like you're
Yeah.
trying to be who they are.
Right. And it's
But
just,
God created you both to be differently, you know?
Yeah.
And we forget that all the time. I forget that all the time, you know?
Yeah.
So
and it's sucking up your time. You're actually devoting
it
time.
is, yeah. You
to
put so
thinking
much
about these
thought into
things,
it.
Right.
You put so much thought into just like, I don't have this, that, or the other. And it's just,
And is that the enemy pulling you away from who you were actually made to be?
yeah,
Right?
Right.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could just shake every student and say, stop looking at them or that or whatever, and focus on who you are, because you're enough. Like
Right.
you are who you're supposed to be.
Right.
And they always, you know, I think it's such a big thing. Like they're so hard on themselves. We are so hard on ourselves when things fail. And when I want to be a long distance runner, you know, and I just can't find it in me to be a, you know, multi-1,000-mile runner, you know, I'm just like, dang, like, why can't I do that? Like everybody else is doing it.
Right.
But that's a lie. Like it's not that, you know, it's just you tearing yourself down to be someone that you're not, you know, you're not designed to be that way. And so it's just a big lie. I think that
yeah, totally.
the enemy likes to tell all of us is that there's something better than what you have. And there's something just outside of reach, but if you try hard enough to get off your course, and if you try hard enough to stop being who you are, then maybe you'll reach it. Just keep going that way. Don't worry about what you're given and what you have in front of you.
Right. Yeah, and just that peace that you actually are. This is hard, right? But if you can get to a place where you have peace that you are who God made you to be, and to rest in that. Lee McElroy had something in her devotion this past week, and she's talking about, you know, God created you exactly who you are to perfection, such that He gave Himself 7 days to get it all done, that we're get everything created, and by the 6th day He was like, "We're done." He took the day off on the 7th day. He was so confident that He had made it well, which means you, yeah, I mean, you know, and that He rested, like it was good. So who are we to doubt God's plan, right?
Yeah.
I also say jokingly, like if you could work that hard, like you were talking about, and we could actually achieve becoming, like, I don't know, pick the it girl or the it guy, whoever you want to be, like, right? And it actually worked, we would have a single person with singular gifts, and we just would not be living out the plan.
There's no uniqueness anymore.
By the way, they're just as troubled. The person you want to be is just as troubled.
Right.
You know, so you just don't see, you're comparing your backstage junk to this person's front stage Instagram post or whatever their life looks like. It's perfect, right? And it's just a lie.
Yeah. Well, and kind of piggybacking off what you said earlier, like just in the creation story, like we also bear His image, right? That's huge. I know that helped me a bunch when I was younger. It's like, I mean, if kids are picking on me or whatever, or maybe I just feel like I'm not enough, it's like, well, like somehow, like, right, we don't know exactly, but like we bear the image of God. Right. Maybe not like God looks physically like a human, but I mean, Jesus, but like we have so many other aspects of us that are like the image of God is in us. And how like reassuring is that? That's like, why are we comparing ourselves to other people? Because we're all in the image of God. Like, then that's a beautiful thing. So, but yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? I think, I don't know, comparison, it kind of comes in different waves. It's like, you're either comparing your stuff, which I think like when you're, at least when I was a lot younger, it was always like, yeah, I went over to this friend's house. They have like, Mom, Dad, why don't I have this many cool things? Like, and then they're just like, well, they have a lot of money or whatever. And you're just like, man, I wish I had like the new Xbox or this, like, this kid has a TV in their room. We only have a TV we have to share or something.
Like when the Wii first came out.
Yeah.
Like your friend down the street had the Wii.
She's like, well, can we get one? It's like, no. It's like, all right, I guess I'll just keep wanting one then, you know, and seeing like, oh. So it's like when you're younger, you compare like stuff.
Right.
Right. And then I feel like, at least for me personally, it has become like character stuff, where it's like, man, that person has so much more courage, or that person's way more brave, or like, and there's still some of that like, man, that person's, that guy's way more handsome than me. Like, I wish I could be that good looking or whatever. But a lot of it does turn into like the deeper stuff. It's not just, oh, they have a nicer car or they have a nicer house. It's like, no, like they have nicer hair, or they have nicer, maybe they just act a certain way that you want to act, but you can't be them,
They always get invited to stuff and I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that again goes back to like, then you're just beating yourself down. You're just like knocking yourself out, and you're like, I'm not them. I'm not them. I'm worthless. I'm not good enough. And then, man, it just, it
and the enemy dances.
It gets, and it gets
right,
deep,
because he's got you right where he wants you.
Absolutely.
And that, like, the problem comparison, it's not like it's a new thing. Like, I just want to tell the listeners out there, the students listening, this isn't just right now and like it is a current problem, but this isn't like a new thing. I mean, we've always seen the enemy use comparison, but I think it's just evolved. And sadly, we're just living in an age now where it's like right at our fingertips. You mentioned earlier an Instagram post.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about social media and the average, user amounts and percentages and all those numbers of how many kids are on social media. And I'm talking, kids just starting middle school, 12 years old, and you're starting comparing yourself, seeing this maybe other 12-year-old being an actor on, some huge show and going and on tour or whatever it is. There's thousands and millions of examples, but this like comparison issue starts so young now, and it's getting younger, and I think we're putting a name to it sooner, like we said. I mean, you grow up 8-year-old and you're like, hey mom, he had like the Millennium Falcon Lego set. Why'd I get a NASCAR? Like the little car one. Like, wait, I want the Millennium Falcon.
And I think an important point you make there too is like, it's not, people have dealt with this for a long time. Right. And I think that's another thing the enemy likes to I guess, get in our heads, is that we're alone and like, oh, I'm probably the only person. Maybe we don't like say that to ourselves, because even when you say it, it sounds silly, but we think it and we believe it. They're like, I'm probably the only person that compares myself to like the most popular kid in school, or like the fastest kid in school, or the most pretty kid in school, or whatever. And it's like, no, like if you think about it, it's like ironically funny, because everyone is comparing themselves to everyone. Right? It's like I could be comparing myself to Ashton, and then Ashton could be comparing himself to you, and then you could be comparing yourself back to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's like, why we're all just like hiding these insecurities away, and that's really where it comes from, is these insecurities about ourselves and our identity. And it's like,
that's right.
And it's like, it's just a huge web or like circle connected of everyone just wanting to be another person. And it's like, what a mess.
I feel like there's like two. Like comparison, it kind of like thwarts us into two different things. Like, because it is a big mess, and it kind of it results in us like comparing in a negative way towards ourselves. So like, I'll never be good enough. I'll never make that status. I'll never make that comparison, to them. Like, I'll never reach that. Or it's like an obsession that starts curating of like, I have to be better than that. Because. I feel like, us talking about comparison, a lot of it is, because it is. It's an internal battle.
You're either like not up to par with someone, or you're trying to like competitively be better.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're definitely,
And you just, you see it all the times, and and you can be competitive, like you can, that's not a bad thing, but as soon as it becomes the internal battle, I think a lot of people face is, I'm not good enough, so I have to be better than everyone else. And it's like an unreal expectation.
It's affecting how you feel about yourself at that point.
Right. So out of that comes the negative on yourself, but it's portrayed in these two different ways, and it's so hard. It's so hard to combat that in a culture that is all just right in front of you. Social media is right at our fingertips.
Yeah.
So.
How have y'all dealt with? We've all dealt with comparison. I think we've in some capacity. How have y'all like fought back at that? I guess is a question, because I mean we did say we'd solve the problems, right?
That
So
is
it's like,
good, yeah.
Bring it
but
up
like
the
at
hill.
least giving
Identify the
some
problem.
tools,
Yeah.
right? Giving some
Right.
tools to anyone listening, or everyone listening. It's like, what are some things that y'all have done to like, you know what, I'm gonna maybe to like shut out those thoughts, or to like focus on something else, or to, I guess, combat the like, I'm gonna compare myself. Like, how do I fight that? How have y'all done that?
I don't have like the magic answer, but
Yeah.
I think perspective is everything.
Okay.
Right? Like to your point, like the people you're comparing to, they're having just as many.
They're just as insecure,
Just as insecure.
right? Yeah.
So if you can step back and kind of go, all right, I'm not the only one, and to really step back and kind of go, yep, I'm not perfect. And but I'm who God made me to be. And so if you can, not to hyper spiritualize it, but like really, if you can draw back to, I really was made who I'm supposed to be, and really try to live into that. I mean, to your point of comparison, like be the best you can be.
Yeah.
And because you've got gifts and skills that other people don't have. Don't be prideful.
Yeah.
Because I think you can compare, like I want to be like that, but you can also compare like I'm better than they are.
Yeah.
Just as
Ooh,
bad.
okay.
Right. So
Yeah, you could be like, almost like, okay, I know, I recognize their spiritual gifts, and you could reel it back and be like, I'm not going to compare myself anymore, but I have spiritual gifts that they don't.
you're the
And,
guy.
and you could go off on that other, and that's like almost a whole nother discussion, probably.
Yeah, whole other thing.
A whole nother
I'll write that
idea.
down.
But you're the guy with the coolest car in high school, and you pull in and you walk in and you strut into school every day.
Yeah.
What is underneath that?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, that does not actually, and trust me, they're just carrying this box of rocks around themselves. Everybody's got one, right? But if you name it, it takes some of the power away from it.
Yeah.
I think it's good to, not everybody has a bestie they can be super accountable with, but I think if you can name it and just say, God, I feel really bad about myself about this, right? Or I gotta confess, I'm kind of a little bit, they've got a nicer house than I do, or they've got a better car than I do, or whatever, right? Somehow naming it
I think that's huge.
takes away power.
I think that's huge. I think once you, because then the resting at least starts to begin, right? It's like you admit that to yourself, even if you just admit it like internally. You're like, man, I think I am kind of jealous of this personality trait this other person has, or what stuff they have, and then you just kind of zoom back a little bit, or like pull back, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize I was that way, and then you're like, okay, like maybe it's not like, oh, this is a big problem I need to deal with right now, but at least you name it and it's out there,
Right, right.
So
Right.
I think that's big.
Because the other end of the spectrum of not dealing with it is numbing from it, right? Again,
Which is dangerous.
dangerous. Yeah, what are you numbing
Because
with?
you just continue to do it with no. I mean, you start losing that feel of this is wrong, and maybe there's something inside me. I don't know, the Holy Spirit that's telling me like this isn't how it's supposed to be. But the more you grow numb to it, the more you're just like, oh well, we'll just push that to the side and keep moving, and it leaves you in a trap for that you
Right.
find 25, 30 years later.
The classic, just like stuff
Yeah.
it down.
Or-
It'll never come up again, right? Oh, that'll solve everything.
Yeah, or
I-
the classic number is like, I'm going to go so deep into my phone that I'm just not going to deal with my life. Drink, I'm going to do drugs. All these different things that people use to numb, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Danger.
Going back to your question, Mitch, I think for me, I mean, again, like we were talking about before, this comparison growing up looked different for me. Really, really small town, wasn't in the city, so you weren't exposed to like a ton, I think, but there's always comparison. But I remember hearing this talk by Matt Chandler at Passion 2019, so this is my sophomore year, junior year of college, and he, was talking about, we talked about the woman at the well last week, but not to keep bringing up the woman at the well, but it's a great story. And he talked about the woman at the well and basically talking about how when Jesus says he wants to know you, and when Jesus wants to be close with you, he wants all of you, right? So like the imperfections, the things that you're gifted in, and the things you're weak in, the things that God made you to do, and the things that God maybe didn't need you to have that gift at that time, right? And the person next to you does. And I remember that hitting me, and then me just really being overcome with peace of like, dang, okay, thank goodness he just wants me. Just who I am right now. Not what I'm trying to be,
Yeah, I don't need to figure something out before.
Yeah, it's
I
just
go
right
to him.
now. It's just me. And I think about that day and me kind of like waking up. Like it was almost like the enemy finally like let go of the grasp he had on me just in like a split like minute or two of just like really feeling like this peace of like, dang,
So good.
it's so easy. Like it's so easy to just be in his presence, like to be with Jesus. And then I think about that day, and every time I find myself battling, I say battling, but going through comparison, finding yourself in the trap, I think back to how far I've come from then, and then, all the things that I've lived, all the, the jobs I've had, or the people I've met and gotten to know, and like the friends I've made. I think about all the fruit that's come from those relationships, and then I think about how the best fruit came from when I was just being me. Like this job right now, being in full-time youth ministry. It's not the calling for everybody, but I had this gut feeling that that's what God wanted me to do with the the things I have right now, the availability I have. And Mitchell, I feel like you were the similar way. And I think that's how I combat it is reminding myself that I can be content with who he made me to be. Contentment, I think, is the combat to all of this. It's being content with who you are, but more importantly, being content with who God made you.
That's the thing.
And that's the I think it's we keep kind of jumping on that idea of like once you know who God created you to be, then you'll be at least less comparing to others. But like we say that as if it's an easy thing. Like trying to figure out, I mean, I'm 28 now, and I think maybe around like 21, 22 is when I figured out that I was like, I'm pretty sure God created me to be like a youth leader. So it took me that long just to be like, I think this, and that was from a lot of like trial and error too. But like that's a journey and a pursuit in and of itself, right? Of like, okay, God created me to be me in a certain, like live out a certain way, but I need to find that first. And I wish he would just tell me right now. But like you kind of have to figure out like what your passions are, your skills, your spiritual gifts, like what are some things you can to bring to the table almost, and just go that way. And then once you start journeying that way, then you'll, at least for me, I found myself not comparing myself more to the, the runner next to me. I stayed in my own lane, and I was like, I think I can kind of at least see, maybe the whole picture isn't revealed yet, but I'm getting a glimpse of like the future I think he's making for me, and like what he has me on this earth to do. And that was very reassuring. It was very restful to even just get a little tiny picture of that. It's like, I think it might be youth ministry, at least for like the foreseeable future. It's kind of hard to think, 20, 30 years down the line. But at least like 5 to 10 years, it's like, okay, I think you've given me some skills that I think I can put to this. So like, let's try it out. And if you don't want me there, then you'll make that clear too.
Right.
So,
and then it's like running after that. Like
you got to keep pursuing it, right?
Being content. Being content in who God called you to be isn't being lazy. That's not what we're called to.
And you're not one and done either.
Not a synonym, right?
It's a choice every day. Well, the three of us are going to walk out of here and we're going to compare ourselves to something, right? So it's not that you've like got it all figured out, right? But I think Mitchell, to your point, you got to draw yourself kind of back to that northern star, right? Like, okay, right. I also think sometimes, I get a little piece in this, which is because a lot of time I compare myself not from like I got it all going on, because I know I don't, but like from my weaknesses. But I think one of God's greatest gifts to us is hindsight. I'm just going to say that. If 54, I can look back.
I love that.
I can look back and kind of go, it's not in the Bible, but it should be. But, or maybe it is. Anyway, so I can look back and go, all these things that happen, like, it's such a part of my story now. And I think some of my weaknesses, I think that's where God grows you the most.
Yeah.
He doesn't come in and go, where you think you've kind of got it figured out and like, but I think it's in our weaknesses and the things that we feel aren't as good. A lot of times that's where he grows us the most. Yeah. And how many times have you guys had a thing like that where, I've been through that, and then I'm able to help or minister or be there for someone else. And so, again, this is all part of God's plan.
Yeah.
So don't take, we're looking at it so individually focused, like, because our lives we're the only ones who have to be us all the time, right? So, but it's in front of us all the time. But what you don't realize is that you're just a part, like we are talking earlier, like this puzzle, right? And you're a piece of God's puzzle, right?
Yeah.
But if you're nothing worse than a puzzle with a missing piece, right? Be your piece, right?
Right.
Be the piece. And so because he's going to use you. And I so again, not to take comfort in your where you're comparing, where you feel bad about yourself, but again, perspective. I think if you can take those and go, am I supposed to? Maybe these things were actually given to me
Yeah.
because I'm supposed to use these somehow. And let me think about that. Let me think of it as a. I don't know if you can think about it as a gift. I mean, but it
Right.
is. It
Well,
really
no,
kind of is.
And it goes back to, like, if you look throughout all of Scripture, it is very clear that God doesn't call people who are already equipped most of the time. He equips the people that he calls.
That's right.
Right? So, like, even if you do have that weakness that you think is, like, more of a hindrance, it's like, if you, again, stay the path, if you get, I mean, I call myself lucky because I got a glimpse of what I think he created me to do. And if you somehow find that, whenever it is, however old you are, I mean, who knows? And you start pursuing that, it's like he will equip you as you go, right? He doesn't expect you, and he knows you so well too. It's like he knows that some of these things he's going to teach you along the way, and maybe they are going to be really hard, right?
Yeah.
But like that's part of this, like, yes, he made you like to be you, to be that puzzle
That's right.
piece. But he's also like crafting you into a version of yourself that you will be, whenever the end of your life comes. Like he knows how he's going to grow you and push you and become more of what he created you to be, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So it's part of that journey too. It's not just like, all right, like he called me to youth ministry, like cool, like that means he thinks I'm really good at it right now. It's like, well, maybe not yet. Maybe he thinks you can be good at it, and a lot of it will be him helping me
Right.
while I'm doing it. So it becomes that, like, he's growing you too. He's making you into the person that he knew you were going to be.
Yeah,
You
none of
just
us
have
is-
to
none of
kind
us is a ride.
You just have to go along with the ride
That's right.
and trust.
And that it's
right?
I want to make the point too on y'all's great points is it's daily. It's not just to encourage our middle schoolers and high schoolers that are listening right now, where they're like,
Yeah.
dang, like, I mean, they're talking about their full-time jobs, and hindsight is a great gift. And like, I'm only in high school,
Yeah.
like I'm just in the 11th grade, right? And you are made exactly who you're supposed to be. You're where you are right now, going through. If you're going through a problem or like an issue right now, like he has you in that season for something bigger than what you are right now, but he also like is crafting you in the moment.
Well, and how exciting is
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah, right.
Like every day he's slowly but surely, because I feel like God he likes to drip feed, you know? He likes to take his time and
Dang
like,
it.
you know.
I've heard you
I know, right?
I've heard you say drip feed a good bit the past like 2 or 3 days.
It's funny.
Well, we were talking about shows, and I
yeah.
love shows or like books or stories that drip feed you like a character arc that's going to change, and it's like you don't know it's coming really.
Yeah.
And then like finally when it comes to fruition, you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, we've been talking about Avatar for so long. I mean, look
Shout
at
out
Zuko's
Avatar.
life.
Zuko.
Look at Zuko's life, man. I mean, that is
Amy,
one
you
of-
should watch
of
Avatar: The
comparison,
Last
too.
Airbender.
I have not seen
I
it.
think you should watch it.
should.
It is a
But, like,
cartoon.
take
from
him, though,
Nickelodeon,
right?
But it's good.
Okay.
Like he was supposed to be like near the end of the show, like he is the Zuko that he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it took the entire rest of the show, or I guess prior, the entire show for him to be like, oh, that's Zuko. The rest of it, he was in the process of growing and he
Yeah.
was struggling, right? So a lot of it is that. And I think, so he is a God. He drip feeds us, right?
God.
So like, how exciting is it for like middle school and high school, and like, I mean, anywhere in between, if you haven't really even gotten a glimpse of that yet, of just like how he's created you to, with the spiritual gifts that you have, or like what he's created you for. How exciting is it that like you're living that right now? That, like
Right.
everything that happens in your life, good or bad or mundane,
Right.
Yeah.
that he's like slowly but surely crafting you
Right.
into like,
Yeah.
Like,
the
Which I think is-
Amy or the Ashton that you're supposed to be. It's like, that's just, I don't know. That gives me goosebumps. It's
Yeah.
exciting. It's cool. Right?
It is really cool, and I think that's the end goal, right? But some people are struggling, right? And so, but again, I think that's where you've got to find a person. I mean,
Yeah,
shoot, I
accountability.
love
Yeah.
to sit and talk to people. Like, look, find somebody you trust, find someone who's a believer who can give you that God perspective, and go. Maybe it's even somebody older, like a mentor, kind of a person that says, it's okay, you're going to make it, not that I've arrived. But, I've been there, done that, thought in really hard places where I was like, I low-key hate myself. I mean, this is just, ugh.
Yeah. Where you can just be raw and
And
open with them.
And it's like, all these people think that, okay, well, now I'm comparing to the people on the podcast, right? So it's, but really it's just like, your point is good. It's a daily struggle. You got to get up and go, all right, putting on the armor again today,
Yeah.
but to keep going, because it is a refining process.
Right.
We're all just figuring it out.
And none of us came out of the womb this way, right? We're all on a journey, and so learning every day.
Right.
But,
And God's plan should not be discounted by how old you are.
No.
I think I know me and Mitchell have conversations in our office about this just tons of times. It's just like, man, I wish I could just tell them that it matters right now. Like this, everything you're taught, everything you're talking about, and everything we talk about in life groups or in connection, or just in the car rides home from Whataburger, like it matters, and you matter, and this whole thing, it is a daily decision, but it starts now. You don't discount it till you graduate college. Like, this isn't a future you problem. It's right now. And so, it's just, it's big. I had some scripture pulled up that we've been quoting it, I think, a lot, but running the race. And it's Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. For you guys listening, I want to read it for us real quick. It says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And I don't know. I wanted to throw that truth out there.
I love,
So good.
love the just keep your eyes on Jesus.
Yeah.
Keep
running your race.
I mean, that's the best thing to be told, right? And we all kind of touched on that. Like, you have to focus on what he has for you. It's like, well, the best way to do that is just look at Jesus. I mean, think about it. You're ever thinking about your worth or how you just suck and how, you're not good enough? I mean, then keep your eyes on the person of Jesus who said you were enough
Right.
to die for you.
Yeah.
It's like, give his life for you. That is someone who says you're worth it. And it's like, I don't know about you, but it's hard to focus on those bad things, even if they hurt a lot. And I'm like, oh, I'm not enough. I suck. I'm not good as this person or that person or have the stuff they have. If I'm focusing on the person in the face of Jesus who says the exact opposite of that, who's like, no, you were enough. I already showed you that because I died for you. And I made you right in the Father's eyes because you have this victory with me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just that'll keep you running, man. It really will.
And running, just stay in your lane. That lane is laid out for you. This whole race of life that we talk about, it's laid out for you and you alone. Nobody else is built like you to run that race, and you're not built like anybody else to run theirs. So get your eyes off of the people, running their own thing and figuring out and stumbling and falling and tripping and trying to get back up again. It's not your race.
Yeah.
They're running. It's
a
theirs.
great analogy. You think about racehorses. Why do they put the blinders on them? Is so they can't look left and right and see the other horses and where they're coming from.
I love these race analogies. They are so good.
It's a good one.
And you're gonna you run the race and you get to complete it whenever you meet God in heaven one day, where he says, well done, good and faithful servant, right? That's the race we're running towards.
Amen.
And so that's about all I've got. It's a big topic of comparison, but I feel like we
Are we putting the Chuck's Chairs thing, or should I do that again? I don't know if we were recording yet. The Chuck's Chairs is so good.
Yeah, shout it out again. I think we got the beginning of it.
Yeah, I just don't. We were just kind of like talking. I don't know if it was going to be.
Again, this is not officially sponsored by Chuck's Chairs.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
I want to
good one,
shout out.
though.
I want to shout out Gunnar Rogers, and I'll send him this clip too
Okay.
because he has his own podcast, and it'll be kind of funny. But
Nice.
yeah, he wrote. So Gunnar Rogers is this guy that I used to work at Lady Lodge Youth Camp with. So was in a cabin with him as a camper. I mean, is one of my best friends, and we were campers together, counselors together, like top staff to like central staff together, and he wrote his own children's book called Chuck's Chairs, where it's simply about this guy, Chuck, who crafts all this furniture, like tables, cabinets, chairs, all for their specific purposes, right? And we've kind of touched on this already, but if you want a very simplified version in a children's book, this is kind of that idea, right? So it's a soft plug too if you want to go buy his book. But no, it has so much, biblical truth in it because this chair is like, I want to be a table. I want to be a cabinet. I want to be like, look at how tall that table is. I want to be like that. And it's like, no, not. I made you to be a chair. And that's exactly how the book ends. It's like Chuck saying, no, if I wanted you to be a table, I would have made you to be a table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly
Yeah.
what God says to us. He's like, why are you looking at everyone else and what they have and what they are? Like,
Yeah.
I created them for their purposes, but I've created you for this purpose. And it's just a beautiful message. I love it so much.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
yeah.
That's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
Mitch, Amy, thank you guys for joining me this
Thank
week
you.
on Fold Out Fellowship. Give us a like, follow, subscribe, whether that's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram.
Man, we're on
Anyone
everything now, huh?
There's a lot, yeah.
Or if you see us on your, cereal box or something.
Yeah,
or
if
whatever,
you
like-
see me on your Wheaties
Yeah.
cereal box,
Or if you see this, like, we had a Super Bowl commercial. Like,
yeah, I mean, Fold Out Fellowship, it's a Super Bowl commercial ad.
we're not that big of a deal.
No, yeah, it's very humble.
Or if you're local and just want to come and talk about this topic.
Right.
If you're-
a live audience.
Yeah.
a
If you're-
live
if-
audience,
if
too.
you're
We have a live
struggling.
audience.
If you are, yeah, that's a great point, Amy.
Yeah.
If you are struggling with comparison, we have some message buttons on Instagram, but also we're at MDPC in Houston, Texas. Come on by Houston, Texas, and we'd love to talk to you. But yeah, we love you. We thank you guys for listening and tuning in. We'll see you next week on Fold Out Fellowship. Peace.